Welcome to another episode of Bourbon and Data Breaches, where we cover 5 of the most interesting breaches from this last week. I'm Steve.
I'm Frank.
Well, this week we have construction sites, campuses, insurance files, organ banks, and labor courts when ransomware targets contracts, classrooms, claims, and case files. Jumping right in to story number 1, WCT Holdings is a Malaysian infrastructure and construction conglomerate. And they had a meeting this week with Gentleman. That's right, Gentleman Ransomware. Not to be confused with Gentleman claims they breached WCT Holdings, a major Malaysian infrastructure and construction group. When attackers hit large engineering firms, they're not just stealing spreadsheets. They're potentially accessing blueprints, contract data, supplier agreements, and financial records tied to massive development projects. If you've ever dealt with construction, this may also cause a few delays. Frank, what do you think about that?
Definitely. Having worked in construction, I can say companies run under constant pressure, big contracts, tight deadlines, governments and suppliers everywhere, sometimes around the world. Now living in a country full of obstacles, interruptions, union disputes, even extortionists, I can tell you disruption is everything. It's about stopping momentum. It can affect payments, subcontractors, and negotiations equally. So when internal financial data or project documents leak, that creates long-term strategic damage. Attackers understand that construction firms cannot pause easily. The bigger the project, the higher the daily cost of chaos. And that's the whole point of it.
Moving right along to story number 2, Maat University out of Thailand is a major public university. They checked right in, enrolled, and started attending class. That's right, gentlemen. Ransomware also claims a breach of the Maat University. Universities remain a favorite target of gentlemen because they combine student identity data, research programs, and decentralized IT systems that are notoriously difficult to secure consistently. Their website is serving ads, so gentlemen got access to their web servers.
Yeah, I'm all in for Spanish. Universities operate between openness and complexity. They need collaboration, shared systems, external partnerships, but that makes security uneven. One department might be strong and another might be outdated. Research environments often run specialized software that doesn't get patched regularly, and that creates quiet entry points. And once inside, you can find identity data, dynamic records, internal emails, maybe even research results. Education keeps appearing in ransomware reports because it is decentralized and predictable.
You don't see every ransomware gang going after universities. In fact, some of the top gangs don't even bother. Just because you're not being targeted by Akira or Chilin does not mean that there's not a gang that has your type of organization right in the middle of their radar. Speaking of Chilin, we've got Chilin making an appointment with Tower Insurance Services in the United States, an insurance services provider, Tower Insurance Services. Chilin had an impromptu meeting with them where they claimed they breached and stole some documents, maybe some sensitive information. Insurance firms are high-value targets because they sit at the intersection of identity, finance, underwriting, data, and regulatory documentation. So Tower Insurance Services, they have a little bit of investigation to do with Chilin.
Insurance firms are great data concentrators. And like you said, they sit right between customers, financial systems, regulators, meaning identity data, payments, claims, history, risk profiles are very, very likely to be stored together. So when that data gets exposed, fraud potential increases significantly. You can imagine regulators will not be patient. What this shows is that ransomware groups know pretty well that regulated industries feel double pressure from both customers and authorities, and that increases the likelihood of payment.
I like this next story because I can pronounce all the parties involved. Once again, here in the United States, we have the San Diego iBank. They are a healthcare adjacent nonprofit, and it looks like Pair Ransomware had their eyes checked this week. That's right, Pair Ransomware claims San Diego iBank with alleged exposure, including health insurance numbers, financial data, provider account details, and personal identity information. Medical nonprofits may not look like prime targets, but they often hold deeply sensitive, regulated data. We have San Diego iBank with the documents that Pear is claiming. That is certainly a hard eye test.
Yeah, healthcare nonprofits may not look large, but the data they hold is still deeply sensitive. By the way, it is San Diego. That's Spanish.
No, not here in the United States. It's San Diego.
Yeah, our year.
Look,
Yeah.
I lived in Texas. We had Amarillo as a town. No, Amarillo. No,
That sounds funny to us.
yeah, we Americanize those words now.
But we Argentinians have our own accent and spelling ways. So back to our topic, think about medical details, insurance numbers, financial information. That combination is very powerful in the wrong hands. Hackers don't really care about size. They care about value. So even smaller healthcare orgs can become high impact targets if the data is regulated and personal enough. Once those leaks start to circulate, the damage will last for years. And it makes it kind of heavier than it first appears for a nonprofit.
Well, you'll be happy, Frank. This next victim won't be happy, but you'll be happy because you get to be the authority on how to say this one. But I'm gonna go first. The Local de in Mexico City, Mexico. Pretty sure I got that spot on. They had a court date with Tengu. Tengu claims they breached Mexico City's labor and arbitration authority. These entities manage employment disputes, worker identity data, and regulatory case records, highly sensitive information tied to both individual and corporations. That is a lot of web drives that they took a screenshot of. I could not load the specific government agency, so I'm just going to show you the government of Mexico. What do you think of this one, Frank? Maybe you want to take a stab at pronouncing it.
Good job. It actually is the government of Mexico.
That's what I said.
Yeah.
It's exactly what I said. Perfect.
We have a State Department that manage disputes between workers and companies, and that is employment records, salary information, internal complaints, legal filings, among others. And when that information leaks, it can create reputational damage and strategic pressure in ongoing cases. Government legal authorities being hit by ransomware operators can quickly turn the situation into a political mess. It's no longer just IT, it's public trust. Attackers understand that governments face pressure not only to restore systems, but to control the narrative.
You know, we often talk about ransomware gangs targeting North America. That's typically code for targeting the US. But this would be a North American ransomware attack. So it's interesting to see certain gangs going after North America, but not after the US or usually Canada. Mexico is on the leaderboard, whether they want to be or not.
Yeah.
This week, we had infrastructure giants and universities to insurance providers, healthcare nonprofits, and government labor courts. Ransomware continues targeting sectors where regulated data and operational sensitivity maximizes leverage. If your organization manages contracts, identity records, medical records, legal cases, you are not just a business, you are a pressure point. Remember that attackers don't chase headlines, they chase leverage. Until next time.